everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary AI Brief. I am your co-host, Robert, along with co-host Dr. Adam Little and the AI avatar of Aaron Massacre. So one thing I want to quickly do, we got some great feedback on LinkedIn in this last week, one of which was that maybe a little bit more of an introduction as to who we are and what we do would be nice. So my name is Robert Sanchez. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Empathy. We are a marketing and tech partner for client experience obsessed independent veterinary practices. And the other thing I'd like to kick over to my co-host is this was an insane week in AI developments. I mean, honestly, nothing else to me comes close since probably the launch of ChatGPT back in 2022. And there's so much we could have talked about today, and we just can't because this has to be the GPT-5 episode. And so, what I would have liked to talk about today, and I'll invite my co-hosts to share what they would have liked too, would have been there was one thing. Every once in a while, there's something that you see from an AI development that makes you really radically rethink your priors as far as what's near term possible. And to me, that wasn't even GPT-5. It was Genie 3 by Google. Basically they call it like a generative interaction engine, I believe. And it's essentially the Matrix. Like you can, you with a prompt or an image, spin up an entire world that is infinitely explorable. Like it generates itself in real time. There are, besides gaming, other potential applications, but oh my goodness, that would be absolutely fascinating. And I hope there's a time and a place for us to dig into that there. All right. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So, as Robert mentioned, I'm a veterinarian by training. Basically, spent my career at the intersection of technology and animal health. These days, lead a group called Exponential Animal Health Inc., where we help the veterinary industry create and implement and scale AI products and other new technologies. Work a lot with startups as well as some larger clients, and then working with, I think, groups of veterinarians to help think through like implementation in their practices, as well as, questions that they should be asking of themselves and their teams as you look at how do you ride this tidal wave as opposed to maybe get crushed underneath it. Something this week, G3 was pretty cool. If you haven't checked out the kind of YouTube videos of that, I would definitely recommend that you do. And one that I've been playing around with quite a bit is like Grok's Imagine. So their new image generation model. I think most of the audience has hopefully tried some of these image or video generating models before. They tend to be really slow. They tend to be clunky. Imagine was one that felt incredibly quick and very seamless. However, it's also one where the guardrails seem like completely off. And so you can generate a lot of stuff, copyrighted. From my perspective, seems like more copyrighted images. I was creating Harry Potter themed images of my buddies and some posters and things that frankly other models just wouldn't. And so I think in taking a step back, there's a lot of these kind of emerging areas where kind of what is that line? And obviously there's lawsuits and things that are happening right now on both the data used for training as well as that output. I believe Disney's soon mid-training right now about the same sort of thing. So it is really interesting when there's a model like that's like, hey, fast, available, and basically create to your heart's content, versus some of the other models, which I think have really tried to batten down the hatches when it comes to generate images in a Pixar style or in this particularly well-known style. So that was quite interesting to see that available.
Okay. So Aaron Maskar, I'm VP of Partnerships at Covet. Covet is one of the very early companies to come in with an AI scribing solution, and has since turned more into a co-pilot. So slowly eating away at all of the things, the administrative tasks that most veterinary professionals don't want to do. Yeah. So what we could have covered, I think it would have been really interesting to dig into some of the Math Olympiad results. I know that we're going to talk about GPT-5 a little bit, or mostly this time around, but like, why is that so important? Like, what are the implications of that? Not just for like math in particular, but more generally, what does that mean when we start talking about the implications for things like healthcare? So just as like a bit of a teaser, one of the biggest challenges that exists with AI is doing any sort of dosage in veterinary medicine. So if you're trying to think about the specific dosage for an animal, using AI for that purpose has always been a challenge. Does this actually eat into that? And does this make that a little bit easier? So I think that would have been interesting to just kind of speculate on that a little bit. And then there's some other stuff that's happening, like it's just a recent post about a new MRI machine that has now reached a portable MRI machine that has now reached 100 patients, right? And so, like, what are some of the implications that we're seeing in diagnostic tools? So that could have been pretty interesting too. But let's talk about GPT-5.
And you said it. This is the GPT-5 episode because it dropped. It dropped the Thursday of last week, and there's been an enormous reaction and response to it. Before we get into that, though, I think it would help for us to talk a little bit about why model releases are such a big deal and a little bit about the chronology of what's happened in the past to bring us here so that you know kind of how to think about GPT-5. So we got the original ChatGPT, which was GPT 3.5 in late 2022. And that was the first time people were able to have something of a conversation with a computer, which blew people's minds. Like, we always thought of chatbots as these kind of clunky, annoying, and, occasionally humorous things. And now all of a sudden it was almost like it had life to it. And so that was a significant development in human history. And so first we had what's called O1, and then we had O3. And the big, ever since 4 came out, the big anticipation, of course, was 5. And that's what we got on Thursday was GPT-5. And, there were a few important ways that OpenAI and Sam Altman framed the release of GPT-5, which, like, so highly anticipated and had so much hype around it. It's a difficult thing to live up to. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about kind of the mixed response that it's gotten. But the way they talked about it is what's so interesting and pertinent to this industry in particular. Because what Altman said effectively is there are 3 critical use case advances within GPT-5. The first is encoding. And I'll tell you, like, oh my goodness, we are about to get a bunch more what's called vibe coders out there. It is incredible at allowing you to say, here's this problem, here's this thing I'd like to be able to do. Help me do this thing, and it'll do it. And what's really cool about 5 is it's got more kind of momentum built to it. It'll try to help you actively do the next thing too. This is clearly a much better model at creating software, which does have important implications. The second use case was writing. And this is probably where it's more a little mixed as far as the response to it. But the language out of OpenAI is that this is a much better writing model than what people have had access to before. And finally, there is health guidance. OpenAI spent a lot of time in their, hour plus long live stream talking about how to use ChatGPT as a health guidance partner. And they brought on a woman who had been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and she talked about how she used ChatGPT to figure out a treatment course that ultimately didn't really agree with the doctors that were collaborating on her case, wanted to see her do. And the way they framed it, and I'll read you a quote from what the woman said, is that creating smarter and more empowered patients that can fully participate and advocate for themselves in their care is really the way that they're thinking about it. And so the big takeaway is you now have OpenAI saying, use ChatGPT for healthcare as your own assistant, as your own advocate. It's kind of like, all right, we as an industry grapple with Dr. Google and maybe we wish it away. And this is a real like monkey paw curls moment, because I think if you haven't already, this is going to start showing up in your practice. You're going to see pet owners who are using ChatGPT to really do a lot more investigation and exploration about what could possibly be going on with their pet. Perhaps asking for, a visit summary so that they could work with ChatGPT to figure out what's going on. There are obvious ramifications for the use of this tool in your practice as well. But ladies and gentlemen, we got a a seismic update here, and there's just so much to unpack. So I'd like to go through, a roundtable discussion here and talk about, your big takeaways from this announcement. Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Maybe I'll share my screen. We can go through a couple of pieces of information in the launch that I found really interesting. Can you guys see this? So the first thing, and this is where I honestly saw this and kind of stopped in my tracks during the live stream, because maybe this was a little bit of foreshadowing of what was to come. This was actually a graph that they shared, OpenAI shared during the live stream. And it doesn't take PhD level math to realize like there's something quite wrong with this chart. And I think in some ways this is maybe a microcosm for the release more broadly, where there are a lot of things that I think people are going to see that it is better at, but it's certainly not perfect. And some of those mistakes are now making their way onto the internet, where you can see maybe some really rough edges of this model. One of the predictions
For our
yeah.
listeners, could you describe what they're seeing here?
Oh yeah, so this is a benchmark for software engineering, and they were trying to compare GPT-5 to some of these other models. Obviously, 69 and 38, 30.8 or 31 are not the same number, so those bars are wrong. But the real kicker is putting GPT-5's 52.8 much higher than that 69. And obviously trying to make this point that GPT-5 is a big step forward, but they later corrected this in the blog. But this was on the live stream in front of hundreds of thousands of people. It went viral pretty quickly. One of the big advances was the model switching, right? So we talked about this from the last episode, that, hey, there's this fragmented set of models. A lot of free users don't have access to reasoning. A lot of people have never used anything more than just 4.0. What's going to happen with GPT-5? Has reasoning kind of baked in, and the model can switch, or the AI can switch between different models in the background. In the beginning, people had some difficulty trying to navigate, like, what is happening? What model is actually answering this query? And what if I want to switch those models? This is an analysis that sort of shows that, hey, if you look at some of the other GPT-5 benchmarks, this is an analysis index that encompasses a number of different evaluations. If the model's switching to something that is of lower quality or simpler, you might actually get a response that is worse than many other models. And so right now, the users don't have access and visibility to what models actually being used because of the approach that they've taken. Two things that happen as a result of this: they've already brought back the legacy models as an option for GPT users. So in response to people saying, hey, I liked some of the old stuff, or I want more control, that's now an option. The second is that they're going to be releasing another update this week that sort of shows in a more transparent way what models are being used for different queries. So I think the overall direction of having the AI automatically route to the appropriate model depending on the query makes sense. But in the beginning right now, it's definitely been something a little bit tricky. And then the last part was the hallucination. So I just wanted to show a couple of different slides and some stats that they shared specifically on the healthcare side. Obviously, AI does hallucinate. In the past, this has been a very big issue. This is the hallucination rate of GPT-5 compared to OpenAI's earlier models on the health bench, which is their health evaluation that OpenAI developed in collaboration with, I believe, a couple hundred doctors. Entire blog post breaking this down, but you can kind of see how, hey, GPT-5 is going to be in a better position to tell you, I don't actually know this answer. I'm not directly hallucinate. And here's kind of another example of that. So not that hallucinations are solved, but a lot of thought is going into how do we help the model communicate to users when it doesn't know the answer, ask for clarification as opposed to just confidently lying to you.
For our listeners, the graph that Adam showed basically showed the hallucination rate at around like 14-15% for 4.0, and
Yeah.
for 5 with thinking about 1.5%, which is you got to imagine that's probably pretty on par with like a really smart person and how you would think about their ability to reason through a problem.
So maybe, I guess, like, to summarize, my key takeaways are, I think a lot of people's experience with ChatGPT is going to get better, though it's going to be lumpy. And for folks that have been using some of the best available tools or been using some of these other reasoning models, they might not see that day-to-day lift immediately. The second is that I think we're going to start to really begin to like turn over a new leaf about how people think about the transparency with the models that they're choosing, because in some cases, OpenAI kind of took that away, added it back in. And I think that was a really interesting learning. What does that look like over time as these model releases become more frequent and people become more attached? They have more context. They like the style. OpenAI announced personalities. It's maybe a way to bottle up the way that you interact with ChatGPT and take it between models. And then I think the other piece, just to show, is this ability for AI to begin to work over extended periods of time. This is a metric called meter. Basically, every 7 months or so, you're seeing that the amount of time that AI can perform a task of effectively doubling. So we're on this kind of exponential curve. And I think that's really interesting as you begin to look at some of these more complex workflows. No longer is it like, how quick can I get an answer, but rather, if the query or the question or the task is more complex, can I trust the AI to do it well over an extended period of time? And that's really, I think, core to like the reasoning abilities and some of the tool use and things like that. So I think overall there was a lot of hype about this release. I think the response has been mixed. But certainly, I think, to your point, Robert, there's areas where people are going to find, hey, this is a lot better now in this particular question, but hey, this is something that I got a pretty good answer before. I preferred that style, or I don't see that kind of stepwise improvement that I might have been expecting.
And Adam, so I think that's critically important. This idea of measuring AI's ability based on the time horizon that you can trust it to take on behalf of you. And
Yeah.
but there are a lot of our audience might have heard of the term AGI before,
Yeah.
artificial general intelligence. There's a lot of thinking around like AGI is really going to be basically long time horizon tasks that we can hand off. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about what's the tie there, and what's the real significance of tying that back to veterinary medicine? What would we see with longer time horizon tasks?
Yeah. So let's create a kind of fictional example. Let's say you have your appointment scheduled for tomorrow and you have like 20 appointments. Well, allowing the AI to basically go out, identify who those clients are and those patients. On the client side, I'm going to pull in all the recent information. I'm going to pull in, different threads that they've shared socially, kind of enrich that client profile. Oh, and at the same time, I'm going to go, and for these patients, I'm going to look at all the medications that they're on to figure out, has there been any new updates, any new literature, any new findings there. I'm going to generate a list of questions that I want to tackle when they come in. I'm going to formulate, a plan for those pets ahead of that visit. Well, that's can't be done like in a second, right? What ends up happening is increasingly you'll have those tasks where, hey, if I was thinking that human a task, it might take them like a day. So having the AI go and do this task for maybe half an hour, or spin up multiple agents who could do each part of that task in parallel, that begins to work when you're sort of saying, hey, go do this thing. I'm going to check back in with you in a little bit. And the interface and experience I might be looking for, like as a user, is not just about the output itself, but I want to see like where you are in that task. I want to intervene. I want to trust that you come back. I want to be able to verify your outputs. It's really almost like managing a bunch of human workers. And what's really interesting is, if you think about like managing humans, you're not really constantly looking over their shoulder. You're sort of giving them the instructions. You have the confidence in their abilities to go out and do something, and then hope that they're checking in with you if they need support, guidance, or refinement, or feedback. And I think that kind of relationship and that sort of management is going to start to really be applied to some of these AI driven tasks. And what you're going to see is the creation of a lot of infrastructure to be able to make that task management and that agent assignment a lot more intuitive and frictionless. And so I think that's something that's going to be really interesting. Things like, I'm going to go get manage a patient referral, right? So I'm going to be generating the referral letter. I'm going to be grabbing the medical record. I'm going to be sending it to another veterinarian. I'm going to be checking in with that clinic. These are going to be tasks, and in some cases might end up taking days. And so having an AI that can spit out a fact really quickly, or help you with a homework assignment in like a couple minutes, is useful. But business work, complex workflows happen over many touch points, over many different places, over extended periods of time. And so you're going to need AI that's capable of handling that complexity. And I think a lot of the most valuable tasks are going to need it, right? What do you think, Aaron?
I'm just thinking about this a little bit. Like, so there's the training of the AI tools, right? And then there's like the unsupervised work that they're able to do. And I'm trying to think like, what are the limitations for some of those stuff to hit veterinary medicine? And is it the case that you think that AI is going to get sufficiently strong enough to be able to say, you can just tell AI, hey, go and collect this information for me. And when you have this information, here's the next step, blah, blah, blah. And the AI can kind of figure that kind of stuff out. Or is it the case that you're going to have to provide guidance for every single step along the way? Right. Because I keep thinking about like one of the powers of AI and the thing that we're just starting to unlock is not so much the ability to do these individual tasks and to like assign those tasks, but it's the higher level, like being able to pull all these things together. So if you think about something like, give an example of a workflow that somebody would be going through in veterinary medicine where the client is out there in the field and they've got some sort of issue, and then you need to collect some of that information from them in order to schedule the appointment. And then from there, you need to actually bring the person in and collect that information in more detail. When we start thinking about all these like the individual touch points, and one of the powers of AI is to be able to kind of consolidate all of that into like one simple instruction, right? And so we're getting this like kind of higher level. But when I think about the adoption of those kinds of tools in veterinary medicine, to what degree are people going to need to provide the guidance in order to be able to do that? And so the question really is, to what degree are we going to see the speed of these tools hitting and impacting veterinary medicine in a profound way? And I think once we kind of figure that out, then the velocity is going to increase pretty quickly. But how much of that is going to be guided by the individual person to be able to say, hey, just go get information from this client. And that's the extent of the instruction versus I need you to call the client. I need you to ask the following questions. I need you to, that sort of thing. Right. So it's really about like, how quickly are we going to start seeing the impact of this hitting vet method?
I think we're kind of doing a bit of a dry run with this with respect to dictation, which is you have veterinarians today that will say, I don't trust this thing to write my medical records in the way that I would like, or I have a very specific style or a specific approach. And I think there's two lessons in that. One is that there is no silver bullet solution that fits every use case and every style and every person, which was actually amplified and reinforced with GPT-5's results, because there's a lot of people that said, I don't frankly give a rat's ass that this evaluation is better. I liked the way that 4.0 talked to me. And so people's sense of value is not just about, is this accurate? Is it a benchmark? But rather the connection, the experience, et cetera. So there's kind of a style piece there. The second part is, I think what AI is doing is turning a lot of these kind of enterprise grade workflows to much more individual journeys. And so you have a veterinarian that might say, you know what, I'm very comfortable having AI both record my exam. I wanted to summarize this. I wanted to go do research on that summary. I wanted to start to handle these client communication tasks. And so I don't think there's going to be this magic moment where suddenly the veterinary industry is comfortable with these things. I think instead what's going to be is a small group of veterinarians who are much more comfortable and kind of going 100x versus their peers. And then to your point, Aaron, the intervention starts to fade away because you're building confidence with the AI alongside of it. And so you're giving it these tweaks. And then one day it's like, hey, I've watched you do this 10 times. You can just go do it, right? But there's going to be veterinarians who are still not comfortable with kind of handing that off, in the same way that there's veterinarians that will say, I have a great technician. They can like run my practice when I'm gone, versus people are like, I don't trust them to do a blood draw unless I'm over on top of them, or I don't trust them to communicate to my clients unless I see those emails. And frankly, there'll be use cases that, maybe 20% of veterinarians are really comfortable with, and 50% of veterinarians be like, I would never trust AI with that. And I think that's a little bit of maybe the goal of this podcast, which is how do we understand where that tension exists and how can we kind of break through it? Because at the end of the day, I think clients are frankly going to expect the 100x bet pretty soon. And maybe just to tie this back to Rob, the human healthcare example, and why this was so profound. You mentioned this, Rob, and I think it's really important. They dedicated 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes of having this woman who was a cancer survivor on stage. Now, granted, this is all from her perspective. It's not like we had the medical team all alongside. More on that in a second. But basically, what she said was, I worked with ChatGPT to understand my results so that when I met with my doctor, I could advocate for myself and be not on this information asymmetrical plane where I could advocate and understand what was going on. And then I fed more and more information in throughout my journey to the point that I was able to advocate for an option that I felt was necessary for my care. And I think that we need to expect that all clients will do that in some form for their pets. And in many cases, probably already are. And so I really grapple with what that means in an industry that has largely benefited from information asymmetry and what that means moving forward. I'm not sure if you guys have any kind of strong reactions to that, but I think it was pretty telling that ChatGPT intends to be not just your writing and your browsing and your shopping assistant, but it's going to be your care advocate for all species.
It's kind of nuts if you think, how many people were reacting against the possibility of like Dr. Google, right? And like upset about Dr. Google. If you just think about somebody with like a ChatGPT Pro account and hours of their life being able to devote their time to doing research on some particular disease that they think that their animal has, like leveraging that appropriately from a veterinarian's perspective is one thing, but like, how would you even begin to redirect the Titanic that people are constructing of evidence around their particular issues, right? Like yeah, it's going to bring in a whole new level of challenge.
Robert, I'm curious to ask, because you spend a lot of time helping businesses connect with their clients and really think more critically about their communication style. And I know you had a colleague that kind of went through this journey with her own pets as well. Like, how much of this do you think is almost just like remixing? If I could use like a very oversimplification term, like the plan so that it's more digestible to the client or the patient versus like net new replacing that diagnostic process. You kind of get maybe the distinction there. I'm curious what your reaction was to that.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I'd say there are kind of like big error bars. It's difficult really to know exactly how this is going to play out. I mean, it's like we are living at a knee of a curve and there's a singularity on the other side of it. And the defining feature of a singularity is an event horizon. You just don't know where things are going to be. The thing I think about most, as far as kind of what is the interplay and what's almost the relationship that AI is going to play here between the pet owner and the veterinary team, is I think we're going to see that some amount of knowledge that had previously been really just uniquely given from the vet is effectively going to be commoditized. To me, there are three big takeaways from this announcement, kind of tying this back for the listeners. I think that the first is there are way fewer hallucinations. The second is it got a lot smarter. And the third thing is, how OpenAI is now openly advocating for people to use this as an assistant to them in healthcare advocacy. So I want to tie this back soon to what the killer application for this obviously is, which is diagnostics. Basically, it's going to force us to rethink, where do we sit in this relationship? What has to go through me and what's realistically just not going to go through me? And I think for like the 80% of stuff that pet owners want to learn about, it's going to be generalizable, and AI is just going to tell them. Like, it's just going to get smarter. It's not going to be making these stupid mistakes. It can instantly digest the entire body of veterinary medicine and knowledge. And it's going to be able to give accurate information that you can trust, that is helpful and available all the time, and can also deliver it to them in the style that they would want it to be delivered to them. And like, people are forming emotional connections with AI in a way we never saw with Google. And so I think ultimately this actually is a really exciting thing for veterinary medicine. That might seem scary, that like 80% of the knowledge that we're giving out is kind of like it's going to evaporate because AI is just going to be able to do that. But it's the 20%, the hands-on stuff, the stuff that you need to get your hands on a pet for, that is like really context driven, and you need a very skilled medical practitioner to be able to dig in and get more inputs so that we can figure out what's going on here. Like, we're going to be able to do more of that and do that more effectively.
You do wonder if having that kind of a system along the way reinforces the value of care in maybe some unexpected ways, right? So, for example, a pet owner now, when they're like, should I go in for care for, let's say they have, a pet that's just ingested something and it's like, you're going to need radiographs. And they're like, well, how much is that going to be? The AI will start to set expectations around cost. It will set expectations around the complexity of care that you might expect. And for a lot of people, I think they're learning about these things like as they're happening in the clinic. And so they're kind of reacting and saying like, does my pet need this? Are you trying to upsell me? I don't have the money. I have a plan for this. It can kind of manifest as in different ways, but if the AI is kind of just reinforcing, and if it is as accurate as we hope it will be, it's going to talk about the importance of diagnostics. It's going to reinforce the value of, if you get a bunch of test results that are negative, like why it was still worth it to do, right? And at the end of the day, I've even tried triaging it for some cases, like it lays out the diagnostic options and why they're necessary. And so I don't think the AI comes back with like your vet screwing you and these tests were unnecessary, right? I think if anything, it might help the average pet owner understand and empathize with, to a certain degree, the complexity and challenging nature of care. If you're a pet owner that doesn't realize that, hey, if your pet gets diagnosed with cancer, there are options available. It's not a death sentence anymore. There's a lot of nuance that goes into it. What types of cancer are present, how far along are we, etc. It might actually create a bit of an on-ramp for pet owners to meet the quality and complexity of care that veterinary medicine can now support. And if you're offloading some of those conversations around like financing and budgeting and the importance of insurance, conversations that maybe most veterinary teams aren't equipped to have, but now the AI is just kind of integrating those as like a best practice and an option, I do wonder, does the general public get exposed to this? And is it less of a substitute for care and more, if you were to wave that magic wand, I think a lot of clinics would agree, like, who's your best pet owner? They're coming in, they're engaged in their pet's care. They're listening to what you have to say. You're mutually advocating for that plan. They have an appreciation for the options that are available. They've budgeted and they have an understanding of cost. They've looked into financial options. Like that's a great pet owner from a veterinarian's perspective. And so if AI helps more pet owners kind of get in that lane, maybe that's a way that this doesn't act as a substitute for care or compete, but rather just adds a whole other dimension of that relationship.
And it's important to be able to like think through, how do I deal with this? How do I plan with it? How do I work with it so that it's ideally a net positive? And we are, the three of us were enthusiastic about AI because of the practical applications it can have, but we are not fanboys. This isn't, oh, hey, we're just going to talk about all the great things that can happen with AI. There are downsides that can happen. There are risks, and we want to make sure we really speak through those as well. And other side of the coin is like, how do you use it, the practitioner? And, I'll say we got a really cool, warm reception, like on LinkedIn and from people reaching out, from the inaugural episode. So we figured we'd talk about how to use AI in diagnostics because episode 2 sounded like a good time to get canceled. And so, how do we really think about this from the perspective of a practitioner?
But just try it and test the boundaries of it. What is it? What are the things that it's going to be good at? What are the things that it's not going to be good at? And I'm always surprised at how surprised people are at the results that they're getting out of this stuff. So at minimum, if we think about practical implications of this, like just try it and give it cases that you're comfortable with. You can even like make sure that there's no identifying information from the patient, upload information from that patient and see what you get.
At the end of the day, still the person who is responsible for the guidance and care that pet receives and the decisions that you make. And there's lots of situations. Remember, we don't get to do the thing that you really want to do. Like veterinarians are constantly making trade-offs, right? So let's kind of put that aside for a second. To both your points, like there's this kind of, I think a lot of veterinarians feel like they're sometimes practicing alone. Vin has been one of the most popular tools for veterinarians for a long time, not just because it's the kind of lifeline for a lot of veterinarians to their colleagues, but there's a lot of cases, there's diversity, there's different perspectives. Like care is not black and white. And so having ChatGPT as one of several different sources of inspiration, of critique of your process is really important. And it's not like ChatGPT says, it's leptospirosis, like goat tree leptospirosis, right? Help it understand your diagnostic process. It gives you 5 differentials, ask for 10, ask it to explain why it came up with it. What are the pieces of information and what you're seeing? What's your confidence level in that? What sources are you citing to go multiple layers deeper? Because at the end of the day, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's like, can it give you any value that maybe gives you more confidence or puts you down another path or makes you say, you know what, I hadn't thought about that before. Like that's all beneficial. You'll have clients that have completely different relationships with their pets, have completely different relationships with respect to money and their ability to afford that care, have different relationships with respect to their overall lens on the veterinary profession. And you're kind of walking in and it's like, switch modes in order to meet that client where they are, which is incredibly difficult to do. And so if you can use AI as a way to build that buffer where, hey, you want to explain this for your child who's 8 years old, who's never had a pet with cancer, who they're going to go home, you're going to go home and try to explain this to, let me help you do that. Or you've just emailed me a question and you're coordinating this complex case across you and your ex, and they don't like the dog and you're having difficulty kind of getting their support on this, right? There's 1,001 different situations. And so if you can use AI to sort of help you tailor your responses, your message, your education, the medical information that you want to deliver, and the clarity on next steps that you truly believe in to meet people where they are, I think that's one of the best ways for AI to act as a bridge, because right now it's the world's best vets that are able to do that on demand for every single type of situation. And the amount of burnout and stress, I think that comes from that friction with clients, because you as a veterinarian know what this pet needs. You have all the objective evidence, you have all the medical evidence to suggest like this needs to be the plan, and you're not getting that support, you're not getting that alignment, or you're getting kind of pushback. I think that is a really significant source of the tension that exists in our profession that AI can help us with, as opposed to the other version, which is now the client has AI and you're fighting on multiple fronts, because it turns out they're fact checking you. They're more likely to complain. They're doing deep research on the medications that you're recommending. They've looked up a new therapy that you didn't even know existed that came out of this university. Like, what future do you want to be a part of? Because right now, both are definitely worlds in play.
Got a bit of a funny example. So we were playing around with Covet, and somebody was saying, well, what are the limits of being able to communicate in whatever way you want with the client? And so we just said, okay, take that discharge summary and turn it into a pirate's voice. Right. And so like you can readily just modify any of the language that you want. And that's kind of a funny example. But I think the more interesting part of that is we're working with community support group who is working with like lower income or disadvantaged people. And they specifically said, we need these discharge summaries at most at a grade 6 reading level. Right. And so then all of the discharge summaries are now at a grade 6 reading level. And there's a way in which some of these tools are allowing us to relate with our clients and our customers in ways that we've never been able to before. And we might think that we've got it pretty good because we have like a general understanding of who our client demographics are and that sort of thing. But in reality, the idiosyncrasies of each individual person and the ability to tailor it specifically to them in a way that's meaningful to them drives compliance. And so the better you are at communicating exactly what you want to be able to do in the exact way that the person wants to be able to hear it means that animal is more likely to get that care. Right. And that's pretty exciting. That's not like a GPT-5 moment necessarily, but I think this is all part of the wave of adoption that's happening in veterinary medicine, because like we've never seen anything adopted like this before.
Just to kind of wrap things up for our audience here, how to think about the main takeaways from the show. There is this advancement is going to have two sides of the coin. There's going to be the consumer side. Pet owners are going to be using this more and more. Adam's reference to the robot with you, like that very much is coming. I don't know if it's going to be glasses or if it's going to be, whatever Altman's cooking up with Joni Ive, Apple's old head of design. They're throwing a lot of money behind something that is supposed to be this always on context aware companion. I don't know, but this is coming, and we have to talk about it because this is going to dramatically change the way our relationships with clients work. And then the other side of the coin is, how do you, the practitioner, start putting this to use so that I love the idea, like the 100x vet, right? Like, how can we actually reach that promise? Like, what are the tangible steps to take that could get you there? So that doesn't just sound like fantasy. It's like digestible and real. And, the two ways we've talked about it here, one is kind of like this promise of hyper context aware, personalized experiences. And that's something I feel, pretty comfortable commenting on. Like that's really what we've been thinking about and working on with digital empathy for the last, say, 12, 18 months. But then there's this other one, which is like AI as a diagnostic assistant. And I personally don't feel nearly as comfortable providing you with the medical degree advice on how to do that. So Adam, you had a brilliant idea, I thought, for this. Can you tell the audience what we're cooking up?
Broken clock strike twice a day. So I think it's worth to call out that, especially as you move towards some of these more advanced medical use cases, things like hallucinations can be really detrimental and damaging, and understanding where those guardrails are is really important. And the reality is, like, there's more specialties in veterinary medicine than ever before. We have better information. We have more specialists. And so we thought, hey, why don't we do something a little bit interesting that will help us do three things. One is understand the jumps in performance in veterinary medical use cases and decision-making between different models. Two is understand the rough points and the opportunities to use these tools today. And the third is look at this kind of from the full stack of that particular kind of case management. So everything from like triage to treatment to diagnostic results, and kind of tie this in like a medical journey, but for every different specialty. And so here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be inviting specialists in veterinary medicine on the pod. So oncology, radiology, we'll do GP, we'll do a bunch of open. If there's a specialist that you think would be great to have, please let us know. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring some cases, and we're going to use ChatGPT-5 and some of the earlier models, as well as some of the advanced models available now, to see how it would actually break down those cases and how the experts in those fields help us unpack and critique the outputs that we get from the AI, but also how we can start to bend the prompts in order to be much more beneficial. And our hope is that the audience can see for different specialties where AI is strong, where it's weak. Maybe there's some surprises that we find, and really get a perspective from the experts in those areas, what they're seeing as like areas of concern, areas of opportunity, and how that pace of improvement in the standard evals that we're seeing really apply to the day-to-day work and their specialty. So we'll do kind of like, I don't know what we want to call it, but like AI case rounds or something. And we'll have different specialists bringing cases that we can walk through together and sharing those examples live. So stay tuned for that. We got some good ones lined up. And this is a call out to everybody. If there's specialties or individuals that you think would be really great for that section, we'd love to come bring them in. And hopefully we can eventually have, dozens, if not hundreds of these case examples breaking down where AI thrives or not, and then maybe look at the performance leaps next time with GPT-6 and the next version of Gemini and Grok, etc.
Thank you, Adam. It's amazing. One more thing I'd throw in is we will bring on noted contrarians as well, who think very differently than we do about AI's application, to make sure that we have the intellectual rigor behind this for you to feel confident in what you're seeing and how you're thinking about it. So we are going to wrap things there. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the AI Veterinary Brief, and we will see you next week. And big thanks to Aaron for joining us from his fancy Parisian wedding. Like, I just can't believe that your lovely lovely partner, and already wife. This is your second wedding, apparently, right?
Yeah, not the second wife.
Yeah.
First wife, 10-year anniversary.
Yeah. That's so
Congratulations.
but yeah. Big congratulations to you, Aaron. Thanks for joining us, and cheers, everyone. We'll see you next week.